The Brooklyn Nets are on the cusp of another great NBA season. Or are they? I mean, look, it doesn't take me much to tell you how the Brooklyn Nets cannot perform at the highest level this year. They are 1-8 against teams that have a 60% win percentage or better. Those are teams that are contenders, the teams that will end up facing them in the playoffs. Teams like the Bucks, teams like the Bulls, teams like the Phoenix Suns. 1-8 against the best teams in the NBA does not solidify you as a contender. And, as all the injuries they've faced, the COVID protocols, what Kyrie Irving has done, it is very likely that the Nets have no chance to win the championship this year because of how bad they perform. Let's get straight into it. So let's get straight to the meat of this topic, or the meat of this thought that the Nets are probably not contenders. And this is because they are 1-8 against teams with a 61 percentage or better. If we look at the 8 games that they lost against those teams, they shot 33.6% from 3. And if we look at the games that they played against those teams, the games that they lost, and we took out the one night where they shot well from 3, they're shooting 30% from 3 against top 8 teams in the NBA. Now that is ugly and that is sad, but that's just the reality of the Nets this year. And I'll tell you who can solve this problem, but the Nets have looked very, very ugly. I mean, look, a -99, which is on average losing by 12.3 points per game against these contenders, is something you do not want to see. In itself, Nikola Jokic has won against the Suns and has beaten the Warriors and is 2-0 against those teams. You know who his second best player is? Aaron Gordon. And you know who the Nets' second best player is? James Harden. So you're telling me on a team with Aaron Gordon, you have a higher chance to win against a contending team this season than you do if you have James Harden and Kevin Durant? It's weird, and it might not be true that they cannot perform at the level that Aaron Gordon and Nikola Jokic are doing, but they haven't been doing it up to this point. Against contenders, they've quite literally been awful. James Harden hasn't been showing up against these teams, 16 points per game on a lot of turnovers and just being inefficient. Look, like 40% from the field is not good. That's what James Harden has been doing all season. We can talk about how he's been underperforming, and yes, I would touch on that if I needed to, because I think it's common knowledge to this point that James Harden is not having the season this year that he's had in the past. But we don't need to touch on that. We know James Harden has regressed. But what has made this Nets team so dysfunctional? It looks like their team has solid depth. Patty Mills is a great role player, and he comes off the bench, and he's shooting pretty efficient this year. Not many players on the Nets are underperforming that much. I understand Blake Griffin, maybe Bembry not playing that well. Paul Millsap is not that good, but every team has those 3 players that do not play well for them. So what is their biggest problem? To me, the Nets' biggest problem is Joe Harris. Yes, you heard that right. Joe Harris, the guy who is known as a role player. He does get paid good money, about $18 million a year, but he's a role player, right? It doesn't matter if you don't have him, because all he does is fit a role. To win in this league, people say you need superstars. And yes, you need superstars, but to win in this league, you also need a little bit of depth. Something that can just get you over what you have right now. For the Lakers, that one season, it was Kentavious Caldwell-Pope or Danny Green. For the Warriors, when they had Kevin Durant, they were so stacked they didn't need really role players, but it was Andre Iguodala. And in this case, for the Nets, for a team that has championship aspirations, it is Joe Harris. Now the Nets right now are shooting 35% from 3, about middle of the pack. 35% from 3, over 30 attempts a game from 3. That's solid 3-point shooting. But when it comes to shooting the amount of threes, they are 6th worst in frequency. So a league that has always catered to the 3-point shot since the last 5 years, now they're taking some of the least 3-pointers. I said they're taking 30 a night. They're not taking 30 a night. That's not completely worrisome because, you have great offensive players, right? You have Kevin Durant, James Harden, Kyrie Irving, who gets to play on road games. But it actually is detrimental to your team's success, because if we look at some of the most successful teams, it has been the Houston Rockets, who jacked up more threes than anybody has in NBA history. They shot more 3-point shots in a whole season than they shot 2-pointers. That is something that has only been done once, and they did it. And they got to the Western Conference Finals. And barring them playing a super team, then they probably would have made the finals. So some of the most impactful and best teams in the league shoot well from 3. You can see the Warriors, You get the point. What also made the Brooklyn Nets crumble in last year's playoffs was because they were not shooting well from 3. Joe Harris hit a terrible slump. I mean, 24% from three in the series is ugly in itself, but when you have the rest of your team shooting that bad from three too, it does not help you at all in winning that series. But it gets worse. They are worse than league in catch and shoot frequency, meaning that they have the least open three-point shots in the NBA. And even though that they do shoot middle of the pack on those catch and shoot jump shots, they don't generate enough of them. But yeah, let's look at this. My whole philosophy of why Joe Harris might be the most important player on the Nets roster to come back right now, yeah, that's a long sentence, but it's true. First 14 games with Joe Harris, the Nets were shooting 39% from three on 35 attempts a game. That's a 59% true shooting percentage when you factor in everything that they've done. 59% true shooting percentage is elite. Only teams that shoot that well are championship level teams, and that's what they were looking like in the first 14 games of the season. You know, they were great. You know, maybe besides James Harden not playing well, they looked amazing. But without Joe Harris, from games 14 to games 40, they're shooting 32.5% from three, which is bottom 3 in the league behind the Magic and the Pistons on less three-point attempts. Not only that, I mean, their team efficiency as a whole obviously drops if you're going to shoot worse from three. They're at a 55% true shooting percentage, which is actually below league average. Yes, it's only 0.5 below league average, but the Nets offense without Joe Harris this year has been inefficient. And yes, they've been inefficient for 26 games. So they can't look at this as a small problem, you know. Joe Harris coming back from the injury will be great. And the thing that he does with bringing you gravity and three-point shooting is something that is a necessity to this Brooklyn Nets team. But they need to find some friggin' guys to fill in for him for the time being. You know, I know you have a good record. I understand why you have a good record. You have talent coming out of the ass. But when you're shooting 32% from three, don't expect yourself to be a contender. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, do all that, and I'll see y'all next time. Peace out.
Hey, come on, I got a bag on me. You try to take it, leave you stinking like your last homie. She kinda cakey, little baby, put that ass on me. But I ain't that horny, do you got some cash for me? Why every time you ask him that, bitches act funny. And you keep trying to hold the strap, you won't slap for me. You too happy, I can tell you never had money. Every time you get on live, gotta flash money.